Source: YouTube. 60 Minutes. Last week, officials of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic (DNR) claimed that a group of military specialists from Great Britain arrived in Bakhmut, formerly Artemovsk, to work with Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade. In particular, these British specialists were to assist Ukraine in a chemical attack that would be blamed on Russia and separatist forces, a clear allusion to the Russian government's line on the Skripal poisoning. There has been no credible evidence presented by Russia or the People's Republics in eastern Ukraine to back this claim. This claim is the latest installment of a long tradition of announcements from the so-called DNR that Western nations have sent military specialists or advisors to assist the Ukrainian armed forces. However, to date, there has not been a single credible, documented case of a Western country's servicemen participating in the conflict in the Donbass. On November 21, Daniil Basanov, the head of the so-called DNR militia press service, claimed, "We've received intelligence that a group of British military specialists has arrived in Artemovsk, Bakhmut, with the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. According to our recent reports, some of those who have arrived are part of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of the United Kingdom," Basanov continued. At the same briefing, he also noted that the so-called DNR intelligence observed 10 people among a Ukrainian Special Forces group near the settlement of Dacha with boxes with a chemical hazard sign, and chemical protection equipment, e.g. a hazmat suit or gas mask. Specifically, Basanov accused Ukrainian and British forces of planning to sabotage the sterile factory, which operates in the separatist stronghold of Horlivka. This sabotage, according to Basanov's unfounded claims, would result in a massive chemical leak and cause untold amounts of ecological and human damage, all while blaming the incident on Russia or separatist authorities. It is unclear how British and Ukrainian forces would place blame on the so-called DNR for launching a chemical attack within their own territory and near their own soldiers. On November 22, so-called DNR spokesperson Eduard Basurin cut through any of the remaining subtlety of his colleagues' reports on British chemical specialists by claiming that the United Kingdom would be using the same methods of blaming the so-called DNR for a chemical attack as they did with Russia in the Skripal case. Source: YouTube. 60 Minutes. A few days prior, so-called DNR authorities accused the Ukrainian forces of planning a sabotage of the sterile factory on behalf of Ukraine's Western curators, with this British specialists' claim dramatically escalating the geopolitical intrigue. As one would expect, there is no actual evidence provided for any of these claims, and there have not been any visual materials or witness accounts published corroborating the so-called DNR's claims of the arrival of British specialists in eastern Ukraine or of any military activity near the sterile factory. Claims regarding Western soldiers, advisors, and chemical agents finding their way along the war's front lines appear almost monthly in press briefings of the so-called DNR and so-called Luhansk People's Republic (LNR). Yet, like Ado, these attacks and mysterious foreign meddlers never and likely will never materialize, despite the fact that so-called DNR officials such as Eduard Basurin and Daniil Basanov still regularly herald their almost imminent arrival. For example, in May 2015, Basurin claimed that Ukrainian forces were planning to use chemical weapons against civilians, with the help of American military specialists, who came into Mariupol. This, of course, did not happen. Headline from the 29th of May 2015, DNR, American military chemists are preparing chemical weapons for Kiev. It's possible that the Kiev regime will prepare a diversion in the territory of Ukraine in order to blame the DNR leadership for crimes against humanity. Source: Regnum.ru. Just a few weeks ago, Basanov claimed that Ukraine was preparing a chemical attack in the same style as in Syria with the white helmets and Western security forces. This, of course, did not happen. Source: dnr-online.ru. While Basurin and Basanov like to claim that Western governments have sent soldiers to fight in the front lines of the war, they also like to employ Islamophobia and create an imaginary connection between the so-called Islamic State and Ukraine. For example, in December 2015, Basurin claimed that 300 foreign mercenaries arrived in the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol, and that the local population has noted that those who have arrived speak Arabic and Turkish. This, of course, did not happen. Over a year later, in April 2017, Basurin claimed, "We have discovered the arrival of an Islamic battalion with as many as 500 people in Mariupol." This, of course, did not happen, though. Basurin used a tiny kernel of truth in his claim, as at that time, there were plans, which were never implemented, to create a 250-man unit of Crimean Tatar soldiers in Mariupol. These claims arise fairly frequently, but rarely with any visual evidence to corroborate the reports. However, back in 2015, there would be videos or photographs attached to reports of foreign intervention in the war in the Donbass. In the most humiliating example of this, authorities of the so-called LNR claimed that the U.S. gave Stinger missiles to Ukrainian soldiers, which would have been a significant escalation in U.S. involvement in the conflict. Source: YouTube. LNR Today. However, this Stinger, and the video accompanying its discovery, was a crude fake. In fact, the weapon featured was a fake modeled after a version of the missile launcher in the Battlefield 3 video game. The weapon, found in Luhansk, had misspellings on it, including "tracking Rainer" instead of what an actual Stinger missile has, which is "tracking trainer." In many video games, guns modeled after real-life weapons are slightly changed in order to avoid copyright issues. Thus, the Stinger in the Battlefield 3 game was slightly modified with a non-accidental typo. Unfortunately for the fake artists in Luhansk, they did not realize this when they modeled their Stinger off of a video game model, instead of the real-life one. The fake Stinger missile launchers. Source: Kotaku. Battlefield 3 model for the Stinger. Source: Kotaku. Since such embarrassing failures in 2015, there has been little visual evidence to support the extraordinary claims made by so-called DNR and LNR officials. With over 4 years of Basurin and other so-called DNR and LNR officials crying wolf about foreign mercenaries and approaching chemical attacks, one would think that these claims would only be humored by sensationalist Russian media outlets, such as Live News, and more serious Russian media outlets, including state-funded TASS and RIA Novosti, would pass. Unfortunately, this is not the case. The Russian state-funded news service RIA Novosti covered the claims of British soldiers in an approaching chemical attack in the Donbass as if it were a reliable report, with the headline, "Military specialists from Great Britain have arrived in the Donbass, per the DNR." The article uncritically reports the key quotes and claims from Basanov's briefing. Source: RIA Novosti. While RIA Novosti left a bit of room for doubt in their article, noting that the news about the British military specialists was only as reliable as the so-called DNR officials making the claim, Russian state-funded TASS wire service left no less ambiguity in their reporting with the headline of "The Donbass arrival of British military specialists preparing a chemical attack has been discovered in the DNR." Alternative translation: It's been discovered in the DNR that British military specialists have arrived in the Donbass in order to prepare a chemical attack. Source: TASS. The TASS report mirrors the RIA Novosti article, though with an added sentence: "The People's Militia of the DNR has urged the international community to do everything possible to stop the Ukrainian authorities' plans." Even though the so-called DNR and LNR regularly invent tales of Western involvement in the war in the Donbass, there are actual actions from the US, United Kingdom, and other nations that are worth monitoring. While the US never sent Stinger missiles, real or from Battlefield 3, they have sold modernized rocket launchers that ended up in the hands of soldiers from the far-right Azov Battalion. The U.S. does not send soldiers, let alone specialists in chemical warfare, to eastern Ukraine, but they have U.S. military servicemen training the Ukrainian military. British forces are not going to work with Ukrainian soldiers to blow up a factory in Horlivka, but Ukrainian forces have set up military positions perilously close to a phenol plant near the front line, creating a significant risk of ecological catastrophe. However, when both state-funded and fringe websites in Russia report the same outlandish stories of British chemical attacks in Ukraine, it is difficult to discern real questions of Western and Ukrainian conduct in the Donbass from the outright propaganda. Eric Toller is the lead digital forensic research associate for Eurasia at the DFRA Lab. Follow the latest Minsk II violations via the DFRA Labs.